Hey, it's Keith. Am I racist? I'm going to take a test today to, quote, find out. Um, I'm one of these people that maybe takes this topic a bit for granted, having grown up in the 90s and being of mixed ethnicity myself. I've kind of eschewed this idea of focusing on racism and caring about this topic so much. Obviously, um, in the last 10 years or so, this topic has exploded, and now we're all racists, according to some people, and we all need to be doing the work. And it's kind of alienated me from the left, if I'm honest. I have been a lifelong leftist, so to speak, very politically active growing up, really into ska punk and women's rights and civil rights, and going to Berkeley for that kind of heritage. But nowadays, I relate more as like a radical centrist, as annoying as that sounds. I still veer left, and I like to take these tests online for you guys to think through your own thoughts, to hear out somebody who's being thoughtful and considerate of these kinds of issues. So I'm going to go into this test. I just wanted you guys to see this attention here. I'll read it out loud on this website. This test makes use of a research-based inventory for measuring racism. It does not advocate the adoption of negative attitudes towards non-whites, white being capitalized there. The test is provided for educational purposes only and does not endorse the unequal treatment of people based on their ethnicity. All comments, associations, and actions condemning racism or racist speech do not concur with the aims of the site. Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of sad that we need that sort of thing, but that's fine. So here we are. We're on idrlabs.com, and I'm just going to try and size this window. Okay, that's good. So here we go. This is 20 questions. I'm recording this on a very hot summer day here in Los Angeles, so I'm not going to try and take too long to go through this, but as I do, I will elaborate on all of my answers here, just to show my way of thinking. I'm aiming to be clear and concise and consistent. So let's get into it. Question 1 of 20. It is offensive to ask non-whites, quote, where they are really from. Agree or disagree, fully or partially. So I'm going to talk about my own identity as I take this test. Not that it's so relevant, because I'm the kind of person that, while I acknowledge personal experience and care about the personal experience of someone close to me, and I'm happy to hear stories, I'm big into fiction, yada yada, I don't think that one's personal identity or experience makes them some sort of arbiter or expert on this topic. But since it is kind of in vogue to invoke one's own history and life experience, I'll do the same. This idea of being white or not is such a weird thing. And I guess I have kind of struggled with it, if you will, since growing up. I was aware that I was of mixed race. And so my heritage is Korean and Armenian. And I'm like 4th generation for both. So my families have been here for a long time, since like 1900 or so on each side. And obviously Korean is not white. Though if you've been here for 4 generations, you've kind of become Americanized and assimilated. So this question of being white or not is like so beside the point, especially when you consider the American dream and the melting pot idea and all this stuff. So like I just grew up as a fan of like Saved by the Bell and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and The Simpsons and Nintendo. So like, what does being white or not have to do with anything? You know what I mean? My dad's family is Armenian from New York, and they identify as white. But I think a lot of people might question that, similar with Judaism and Jewishness. Like, is that white? So this whole idea of being white, it's like kind of a new idea. There was a time when Italians were not white. There was a time when Irish were not even considered white, so to speak, because they were part of this like fringe lower class, and the English kind of ruled everything, so this whole idea of being white is so stupid to me, you know, like even living in Europe, like from Greece or Portugal up to Scandinavia, you're going to call all of that just white, you know, from like from Brittany, France, all the way to Russia. You think that that's just one skin tone and one race, huh? All that said, this question was asked to me plenty because I have looked a little different. I like to think that I can blend in anywhere I go, and I have done in my travels. But I certainly don't look waspy or Germanic or British Anglo-Saxon. So it's valid to be curious about what my heritage might be. I think that's a valid curiosity. And this question, where are you really from, has been asked to me literally in those words back in the 20th century. Growing up, that was asked to me, and it was offensive insofar as it alienated me from fitting in. Like, I didn't want to stick out. I didn't want to be so like different. I think it's kind of like an uncouth way of expressing this curiosity, but the curiosity itself is fine. And I still ask people where they're from because I have an ear for accents and cultural distinctions. So here in LA or in Berlin where I lived or in New York, those are all very diverse places. So if I'm chatting with a cab driver or something, it's kind of obvious if they're foreign, and it's not offensive to want to know where they're from. It doesn't have to be asked in this way per se. So I do think there is like a rudeness to saying something like, where are you really from? Like, I'm really from California. That's where I'm really from. But if you want to know my bloodlines, I'm happy to tell you that my mom's ancestry dates back to Korea, back before it was split, back when the Japanese were invading it, like at the turn of the 19th century. And the same with my dad's family being Armenian. I mean, the Turks invaded that place and they got out beforehand while the getting was good. And that's not where I'm really from. You know, those things are things that I've learned over time. And I'm connected to those stories and to my family heritage more so than ever as I grow up. But I still don't feel from those places. I still don't feel Korean or Armenian. I feel Californian and maybe New Yorker and Berliner because I've spent, you know, decades in those places. So it is a little offensive, if you will, but I'm hesitant to even mark that I agree with this a little because it is not that bad. It is not something to cancel somebody for. It's not I mean, I guess it's a microaggression, but like emphasis on micro. There's like most people that ask a question like that are not actually being aggressive in any way. They are being a little oafish and buffoonish. They're not as sophisticated. They're not as metropolitan, perhaps, if you're asking a question like that. To me, if you ask this question and you live in LA, I know that you're not from LA. I know that you moved here recently and that you grew up with this kind of vernacular, this language. Where are you really from? Like, that is such a non-cosmopolitan way to phrase your curiosity of somebody's origins and somebody's, you know, background. And I think wanting to understand someone's background is actually cool. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to know that, but it should be done in a smoother way that doesn't divide you and them. You know what I mean? Like, the reason I don't like the anti-racism movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, is because it emphasizes our differences so much, and that is antithetical to our goals. That is opposite of what we should be doing. So I'm going to stay neutral here. I'm not going to disagree. I don't think it's totally not offensive. It is a bad way of phrasing it, and the way that this question is worded, it does have this question, where are you really from, in quotes, so it's like specific to this way of phrasing it, and it's not a good way to phrase it. I would encourage people to ask that differently. Like, asking where someone's from is very normal. We all do that to each other. And then if someone like me says LA or Sacramento, California, then the next question would be, oh, okay, but you seem to have an interesting mixed heritage. Where are your ancestors from? Versus, no, but where are you really from? Like, that's just like an outdated thing. I don't even know people that still say that. Question 2. Racism in Western countries is mostly a thing of the past. I think if you asked me this 10 years ago, I'm recording this in July 2024, 10 years ago was around the time of Trayvon Martin during the Obama administration. And that whole episode of Trayvon Martin, this black kid walking through a neighborhood in Florida and getting shot by a neighborhood watch guy, that kind of reintroduced this race war hostility that continues to this day. I think it peaked during COVID with George Floyd. If you had asked me this question before Trayvon Martin, especially during those Obama years, which were so exciting, and I remember just dancing in the streets when Obama was elected in Brooklyn. That was cool. My friends and I went to Philadelphia to campaign a bit. I mostly just took photos. But I loved that era, and I felt a very strong hope. Like, it just felt like in that era of like indie sleaze music and, raw photo aesthetic art stuff, like that was such a fun, that was a time that defined me. And this whole racism, anti-racism stuff of the last decade has like ushered in a new bad time, this woke era, really. I would have said that it was a thing of the past. Like, I do think, measurably speaking, it's very obvious that racism in the USA peaked during slavery. Like, obviously. And then when you abolish slavery, which was a very novel thing to do, that a lot of countries, even to this day, have not done, looking at you, Middle East, it's a kind of enlightened, humane, humanitarian, exciting thing for the West, mainly US and UK, to abolish slavery. Like, that is so anti-racist then and there in the 1700s, 1800s rather. And it's gone down ever since. Obviously, we've had Jim Crow laws, which were almost like an apartheid situation. But since then, it's just been getting better and better. And I've not only is that measurable through real things, pick your poison of how you want to measure that, wealth, or representation in leadership roles, or actual laws on the books, redlining, all those things that are no longer allowed. Like, those things have a shadow, obviously. I'm not saying that everything is hunky-dory nowadays, but we were progressing very well to a level of treating everybody by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And since the Obama era ended, and he kind of fumbled the ball, in my opinion, on how he handled Trayvon Martin, focusing on race so much, it was not a come-together moment, unfortunately. Definitely during Trump and today, post-Floyd, like, there is just so much emphasis on race and being anti-racist and providing COVID jabs for black people over the elderly, because of being anti-racist is the most important thing. All this kind of stuff is ridiculous. And so it makes me think, actually, that we're living in a new neo-racism. Like, it's the leftists that have brought this back. Like, I feel like so many people, all the rightoids and their stupid, aging octogenarian family members who still were stuck in the 1950s or whatever, like, that was dying off, and we were moving toward this, like, valuing people for their character, what they bring to the table. Working class, they all work together. Blacks and whites have always, not always, but since slavery has ended, since the black population moved from the South into cities like New York and Chicago, they've been working side by side with the working class whites. And this has just been a trend throughout time that America has been leading the way on ending this kind of racism. And now we're bringing it back in this neo-academic way of overly emphasizing race and teaching kids about critical race theory, which is really sad. So I do lean to agreeing slightly that racism in Western countries is mostly a thing of the past. In terms of, like, aggregating all racism, most of it is in the past. There is still some now, but the bulk of it is behind us. I think I will slightly agree. I'm prone to stay neutral just because I'm kind of thinking of this neo-racism as a form of racism. It's so like popular and trendy to like talk about this and think about it and make sure that you are guilty as a normie white person, to know that you're so privileged and that this is racist. Like, I think that's all noise. Next. It is okay to ask non-whites if they know a friend, coworker, or classmate of yours who's of the same race as they are. What? It's okay to ask a minority ethnicity if they know a friend of yours. Okay. So it's like, yeah, so if you have a black friend and then you meet a coworker and you're like, oh, do you know them because they're also black? That's dumb. That's really stupid. I think that does point. It doesn't point to racism. Like, we're using this word so casually. Like, to me, racism is like literally thinking that other races are inferior. It's like legitimacy for genocide and war. That's what racism is. To just have preferences is not necessarily racism. If you have sexual preferences with partners, that doesn't make you racist. If you have the kind of mind that this is implicating, wherein, I mean, this happens all the time with, like, let's make an example that's not race. If I travel to Berlin this summer to visit friends, and see my old life kind of thing, and I'm hanging out with one of their friends and I say, oh yeah, I'm from California, I live in LA. And they say, oh, do you know this person? They're also in LA. Like, what are the odds? There's 20 million people in Southern California. So, like, what are the odds that I know them? Or like, oh, you went to UC Berkeley? Do you know so-and-so? Like, very doubtful. Very doubtful, especially if we haven't even nailed down the years we were at that school or the neighborhood that we're living in that city. It's so unlikely, but it's just the way, it's a function of how people think. It's like a compartmentalization, kind of funny sorting thing that people do in their brains. And this is an example of that. Oh, you're black? I have a coworker who's black. Do you know them? Like, that's not racist. That's just like small-minded in some way, or like unsophisticated. People do that because of ignorance or silly, like, I don't know. It's not hatred. There's no hatred there. You know what I mean? I feel like racism should have some hatred in it. I don't know why else we would care about it. Like, if you're just like sorting people visually, like, that's natural. We all do that, like, we do that based on clothing. Like, if someone's wearing a suit and none of my friends do, and I have one friend that does wear a suit to work, and I see another person wearing a suit, I might say, like, oh, you're a suit. Do you know my friend who's also a suit? Like, there's no hatred there. There could be, in that example, some, some poking and prodding and joshing around, but in general. But is it okay? I mean, yeah, it's okay. It's not a crime. It's the kind of thing that an oafy guy would do, and then his girlfriend would like correct him, very embarrassing. Like, why are you asking that? Of course they're not friends. Why do you think all black people are friends? But like, to me, my friends, who are all sorts of races, we joke about that kind of thing. It's funny, like that there's humor to be seen there. Like, and there's a very suave way of playing that off for the embarrassed friend or girlfriend. It's like, right, because all black people know each other, right? Ha ha ha. Like, obviously they don't. Obviously they don't all know each other. I guess when I say, like, I'm going to stay neutral on this. It's not that I don't want to endorse doing it. Like, you should not do that. It's kind of similar of like, where are you really from? It's like, don't do that because it's dumb. It's like not very socially smooth. It's bad etiquette, but it's like, it's okay. Like, it's not like you're going to be banished from the friend group or never. I mean, I wouldn't banish you from the friend group for that. Some people might. Like, there are very uptight, woke people that are like, oh, he said this. He's obviously like harboring some, unconscious bias against this, and I don't trust that. so we're not going to invite him around, or he makes us all so aware of whatever. Like, I don't know. But I find it to be fine, but I'm not going to endorse it by agreeing. It's neither okay nor not okay. 4. It may sometimes be necessary for Western governments to detain or investigate non-whites for actions that would not arouse suspicion if done by white people. Well, this is called profiling. I'm getting tired of this phrase non-whites. I'm still going to use, and I guess it's an outdated phrase, I guess it's not PC, but minorities. Like, we're talking about majority rate, race majority and race minority. That's what we're talking about. If we were in China, we would not be talking about whites and non-whites. We'd be talking about Han Chinese and non-Han Chinese. The Uyghurs, the Taiwanese, the Hong Kongian. I don't know what demonic. I don't know what demonym Hong Kong people go by, but there's certainly an other from mainland Han Chinese. And the majority of that country is Chinese. And if you want to talk about racism, let's talk about China. But like here in the US, it just so happens, given our history, that the plurality of people are white, or Caucasian rather, or European heritage, to be most exact. And I say plurality because I don't know if it is a majority still. I think it actually is a majority. Over 50% of the country, I think, still has a European ancestry. But that won't last, and it will fall below 50. But it will still be a plurality. It'll still be... More people will be European ancestry than anything else. And I don't know who's thinking that all the other ethnicities and races would somehow combine and, like, all identify the same way. Obviously not. Like... That's been proven with the term POC being shifted into BIPOC because it's specifically Black and Indian, and Asians don't count as a minority, or Jews don't count as a minority. Like all this kind of stupid gaming. In any case, back to this question of profiling. I don't know. I can imagine a case in which that's true. Yes. I mean... Border control, literally coming back in from Mexico, like that would be an example. I think it would also be the way you speak. I think a Mexican accent speaking Spanish would be the real telltale sign, because you can look, quote, Mexican and still be American and talk like an American. And if you sound like you're from San Diego, which does have a sound, I think a border control person would pick up on that and be like, okay, yeah, they're darker skin toned, but they're obviously Americans. But like profiling, I'm not against profiling. Like I've been profiled. Like I'll just tell a quick story. One of the times I've been in Israel, I was flying out of Israel and I was pulled aside from the main security line and given my own security line in which I was pat down more properly. They were so polite. I was really impressed by the security there, but they profiled me. Like I could be Arabic or Muslim. I could be, right? And that's fine. Like, I'm not offended. I'm not offended by that at all. They were polite about it. They didn't rough me up. It was actually more expedient and quicker for me to get through the line because I had my own, valet service security check. I'm okay with in law enforcement being as expedient as they can. And Sam Harris describes it like this. Like if you're at the airport, who's not a threat. Like the sweet old couple that looks like they're wearing, Jimmy Buffett outfits coming back home from Hawaii. Like they are not a risk. They don't have bombs. Like two retirees from Omaha or something. Like it's so silly to me. Like they're fine. You don't have to pat them down just to show that you're not playing favorites. You're going to treat them just as if they were some Somali sketchy looking guy who is like shifting his eyes everywhere. Like there are telltale signs. Race is a factor. It's one of dozens of factors. How you wear your hair, how you dress, your posture. There's so many things. Like people talk about like it could be racist if like you're walking on a street at night and then there's someone walking toward you and they're black and you cross over. It could also be that they're like wearing really street style clothing and sagging their pants really low. Like there's a lot of telltale signs of concern. That's called stereotyping. It's effective. I'm not trying to endorse it fully. I think that we all should question our biases and give people the benefit of the doubt. But if you're like telling yourself, don't be racist, you can't cross the street, and then you do get jumped, that's really dumb. See, the thing is, like, white people can build bombs too. Obviously, there's like school shooters tend to be white kids, alienated kids. Alienation happens to everybody. So, to me, it is like, this is a kind of a trope in movies where it's like, oh, you're just a good old boy and go along now and build your bomb. Like, okay, you probably should have investigated him. Don't let him off just because he's white. You know what I mean? But I don't know. Maybe I should, I don't know. I can't, again, I think I have to stay neutral because it's like, give me a case. Give me a real case. From what I can tell, white people are pursued, charged, and convicted with frequency also for crime. Like, it happens. So I'm not sure what white people are getting away with that black people aren't getting away with. I'm really not sure about that. I think people might say driving, like driving while black or something. I know I've been pulled over a lot. It's usually for speeding. But, like, cops will do whatever they can to be efficient in terms of fighting crime. So, like, if you have a taillight out, that means that you're the kind of person that hasn't fixed their taillight, which is technically, calling it a crime is a bit heavy, but you're supposed to fix that. You'll get a fix-it ticket for that. But they'll pull you over for that because it's like a 1 in 4 chance, something like that, where if you have a taillight out, you also have priors of some sort, warrants possibly. Like, they're trying to find people with warrants who they can take in for something bigger. And like, criminals tend to commit other crimes also. So they look for like the really small little crimes, like even parking, whatever. But like, it's not because you're black. Like, maybe it is. Maybe that's happened for sure. But like, there's so many other reasons why cops pull over certain cars. It could be the kind of car. But anyways, I think I'm going to stay neutral. I don't want to endorse this happening. I would never say this phrase that it may sometimes be necessary for Western governments to detain or investigate non-whites for actions that would not arouse suspicion. Terrorism, there is domestic terrorism. So, like, I don't know. I can't imagine what that means. So, actually, I think I'll disagree. I'll slightly disagree. 5, it's okay to portray non-whites in commercials as acting subserviently toward whites. It reminds me of this meme of like a stock photo where they have a black guy and a white guy, and they have taken the stock photo of each one being the waiter and the other being the customer. And it's like making fun of like modern day advertising where the black couple or the mixed race couple, more often than not nowadays, has to be the consumer and the customer. And then maybe the white guy is the subservient one. I think that's really try hard and cringe because it's like so obvious. Like, okay, we get it. You want to make sure that black people are brought into the fold as consumers, that you're allowed to, romantically engage with anyone you want. Like, do we need this? Like, I don't need, fast food restaurants telling me all that. But it's fine. Like, whatever. Obviously, those kind of couples exist, and white people also serve black people, and vice versa. It goes all directions. And yes, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to portray minorities in commercials acting subserviently towards majority race. It happens. It's fine. Like, from an acting point of view, you're just trying to get on camera and get a residual check. Like, just cast me in whatever, like, if you think that I would be a better waiter than the customer, fine, like, whatever. I think that it's definitely okay. And I think that a lot of what's wrong with the culture right now are the kinds of people, the higher ups, the really nervous types who think it's not okay. Like, oh, we can't do that. Let's make sure not to do that, because then we're sending a message that we're race. Like, no, you're not. Black people work at fast food restaurants. I've seen it. They serve white people sometimes. Like, it happens. Like, it's not some taboo thing. It's fine. Like, I don't know why people are so on edge about that. Like, calm down. Like, you're being racist. You think that it matters? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, everyone is the same, you know? Like, everyone has the potential to be the same, and you should treat them as the same. That's what I mean. So, to me, it's, like, really silly. Like, I don't know. I'll leave it there. It's okay to assume minorities live up to their racial stereotypes. For instance, black people are good at sports, Asians are good at math. I mean, again, I think about my friend groups and how we talk and joke around, and like, it's funny. It's just funny. Like, I don't know if it's probably not okay to assume, but to imagine or to joke about it for sure is okay. I hope that we get to humor somewhere here. Like, to me, you know, I'm half Asian. I'm not especially good at math. I'm not bad at math. That's a good joke to make. Like, oh, Keith, you're part Asian. You should know this math problem, right? Like, that's funny. It can be overdone, and I have friends that do overdo it. And I start thinking, like, maybe you are actually a little racist, which is also okay. Like, if you're a little racist, it's okay. You know, don't go committing genocide. Don't go burning up houses. Don't go marching in the streets for it, you know. But, like, if you have your prejudices, I don't think it's the end of the world. Like, people make it out as if, like, this is the biggest crime you can commit. Like, being rude is worse. Like, a polite racist is worse than a rude anti-racist to me. Like, I would much rather hang out with, like, an 80-year-old who has some, like, outdated beliefs than some, like, 18-year-old who won't shut up about how we have to end racism. Like, okay, like, you think some things, you know, you think all black people are good at sports. I mean, that's funny that you think that. I mean, I see why you might think that. But, like, that's a place that's just rife for humor, you know, like, good sitcoms like The Office or something make jokes about that because they're funny. The phrasing here is weird. Like, when it's phrased, it is okay. Like, I'm prone to agree a little because, like, I want to take the temperature down, if you can't tell. Like, people need to chill out and relax about race topics. It's okay to, like, make jokes about race. To assume that minorities live up to their stereotypes, look, I guess it's not okay to actually believe all stereotypes. I mean, that's kind of what this is asking. No, like, you should be a little more savvy than that. You should be a little more cognizant of counterexamples than that. But, like, when you hear stories and it's, like, confirming your stereotype bias, like, yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, it happens all the time where it's confirming your bias. So to tell me that I have to fully ignore my bias is ridiculous because it's right very often. That's how stereotypes work. But it's also wrong plenty. So obviously stereotypes are, like, very crude, rudimentary tools to make sense of the world. And it would not be okay to just assume. I mean, you know what they say about assumptions. I guess I'll slightly disagree. 7. It's okay to assume that the kitchens and restaurants owned by non-whites are generally dirtier than the kitchens and restaurants owned by whites. This gets into this whole thing that, like, the Smithsonian got in trouble for recently of, like, white beliefs and systems and ideologies, and, like, punctuality is a white thing. And now, like, it's like cleanliness is a white thing. Scientific method is a white thing. Like, what are you talking about? That is absurd. I would say no, for sure. It's not okay to assume this. Certainly not. Especially, like, in terms of dirtiness, stereotypes span the spectrum in terms of certain races. I mean, I don't know if I should expound on this too much, but being fastidious and clean is not necessarily a white thing. It tends to be a higher class thing. It tends to follow money and status. So a more expensive restaurant, I would assume, is cleaner. You have to jump through a lot of hoops to get to the conclusion that just because Caucasians collectively have more wealth than minorities, that their kitchens are more expensive and therefore cleaner. I mean, that's a big jump. That's a big jump. There are plenty of really high-end Asian restaurants that are very clean, and there are plenty of low-end Asian restaurants that are very dirty, and they're all Asian. They're obviously white, hot dog vendors or something that are not the cleanest. Maybe I'm like, just thinking in terms of this cosmopolitan sense of in the U.S. of like that grade outside of a restaurant, like that carries a lot of weight because, there are inspections of kitchens and you have to do things a certain way to pass these inspections and stay open as a business. And all sorts of restaurants pass those tests, obviously, because they're still in business. So no, it's not okay to assume this. But it's the kind of thing that maybe like a friend of mine might joke about, like, oh, it's that kind of food? Is it even going to be clean? I'll be like, yeah, I'm sure it's clean. We'll go check it out. If it looks dirty, we can leave. Like, there are those kind of like minor prejudices that I've seen people exhibit, and it's okay. But like, you're not a terrible person, but you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. If that's what you're asking me, I would rather you didn't do that. I would rather not do it. It can be funny if you're like making a joke, but like you're still intending to go and eat there. It's fine. But like my girlfriend, she loves sushi, but she only loves high-end sushi. All sushi restaurants are basically run by Japanese people. And so it has nothing to do with race, but she will like look and think, oh my gosh, that sushi restaurant looks amazing. I want to eat there. And then on another street, she'll be like, no, I would never go there. That looks terrible. And she's doing all that calculus based on visual cues. It has nothing to do with the ethnicity of the staff. It's like, does this place look like it put a lot of money into its facade? Does it have a high-end clientele? Is the lighting nice? Like, these are the kind of things that she's looking for. And I think she's deducing from those things, are they getting the freshest fish of the day that morning or not? Is their fish being stored properly in a refrigerator or not? And she's making a lot of leaps to make those calls, but that's what people do. And you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to do that on every metric. And race is not that relevant. And if you are making judgments like that based on the race of the restaurant owner / workers, I mean, that is stupid. That is not a very intelligent way to analyze the situation. I guess it's racist, but it's not. I'll still be friends with you if you do that. I don't think that you're a bad person for doing that. I just think that you're not thinking about it very carefully. I haven't strongly disagreed or strongly agreed with anything yet because these questions are there's so much nuance there. I can like imagine it so many ways. So it's like, again, like I'm not canceling anybody for doing that. 8, it is offensive to tell minorities that they speak English so well. Again, this falls into etiquette and being like polite versus rude. This is, again, more about ignorance than it is about hatred of a race. I actually have done this. Like, I'm thinking about my cousins who, like, one of them is foreign born in the Netherlands and his English is perfect. And what that tells me is that he came of age in an English-speaking environment, because people who come of age in a different language environment and then transition to something else, that's where accents come from. That's where certain difficulties with phrases come from. I think if you're born into a society, you will know the idioms and adages and catchphrases the best. And if you come here 5 years later, you'll know them worse, but not that bad. And then 5 years after that, like as a 10-year-old, you're still gonna assimilate just fine into the language. If you come here at 15, then suddenly it's getting tricky, because like around puberty, maybe, I'm not totally sure about these statistics in terms of development, but like you develop your tongue in these ages. So I think it is a little offensive to assume that if somebody is of a minority ethnicity, that they're not from the USA. Like, so many people from the USA are of a different ethnic origin than England. German, for instance. You know what I mean? You wouldn't say like, oh wow, you're German ancestry, you speak English so well. Like, how stupid does that sound? But it's the same. It's the same as like my family from Armenia and Korea. Like, the Armenians and Koreans both were persecuted around 1900, and the Italians and the Irish came over around the same time. So all of those groups had access to learning English the way that Americans speak it, the same. And if you don't know that because the color of their skin is throwing you off, I guess that's what this research is calling racist. I mean, we'll see by the end of this. But to me, I don't think of that as racist. I think of that as, I don't know what I think about it yet. But yeah, it's a little offensive. I mean, it's rude. It's not offensive, it's rude. 9. Western history books should take care to stress the contributions of minorities to Western civilization. Yeah, how to teach history is a really interesting I used to be in education. I wasn't teaching history, but I would. And I have friends that have taught history, and Western canon is a real thing. All the things that have happened that have been formative and exceptional and worth talking about and learning about, like, there are those things of like, why am I here? Why do I live in Los Angeles, California? Why do those words exist? Like, how did that happen that people in LA in the 21st century speak English? How did that happen? Like, there is a whole history of that story that people care about, and that should be taught. And to me, I think it does make sense to just kind of start with, the Greeks, basically, and democracy and philosophy and the ancient philosophers, and then go through like the Dark Ages, Christianity, Dark Ages, Renaissance, Enlightenment, founding fathers, to here. Like, there is a clear trajectory of that, and a lot of that is going to be Caucasian, because hello, we speak English. Like, we it's not by accident, or it's not random that we speak English, and it's okay. It's okay that we speak English, and it's okay that the English are white. That's also okay. It's also great to point out, obviously, like Martin Luther King Jr., obviously, but plenty of people in history, like even like Gandhi, even though that's not quite relevant to Los Angeles or Californian history, like it's part of Western canon in terms of British Empire. So Gandhi is a big figure. You could go back to the Egyptians, Alexander the Great and Cleopatra and all that. You could go into that. I don't think that we need to be color washing history to make it seem more diverse. Like, I think that's stupid. I think it's okay that so many of the great composers were white guys. It's okay. If you don't think it's okay, go be a minority and make music, which is happening. So, like, in the past, in the 1800s, 1900s, so much of the compositions were by white guys. Nowadays, you have your Beyoncés and your, like, it's fine. Like, there's access now provided. History is what it is. It's okay. So, like, I don't understand this whole thing of, like, no, we have to make sure that we teach some obscure African woman next to Beethoven and Mozart. No, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. It's like awkward and cringe to me that you like want to force that in there. So I disagree with this. 10. It is offensive to suggest that all people of the same minority look alike. So I do this a lot. Not a lot. I do this from time to time, as we all might do. Like, I'll say that, like, this black person looks like that black person. And then a friend will always call it out, like, oh, you're racist. You think they all look alike? Like, no, I don't think they all look alike. I think those two look alike. Just like I think those two white people look alike. You know what I mean? Like, we all sometimes get like, oh, do you know what actor you look like? And then they'll name somebody. I mean, it happens to me all the time. Has done, anyway, in the past. And it's fine. They're not going to pick a black person. Why would they? But black people also are allowed to look like people. So it's like this like hypersensitivity that I find so annoying. It's not offensive. Okay, that all people. Yeah, okay, if you're going to say like all Chinese look alike. I mean, look, this is like a heuristic of the human mind. Like you zone in on specifics when it's important to you within your personal life, and everything else you kind of generalize. And especially if you don't travel or if you live in a homogenous society, like anywhere in Europe kind of thing, or Asia, like you're gonna, like Chinese people think all white people look alike. It's fine. It's funny. That's funny that they think that. And so many white people think that all Chinese or even all Asians look alike. And if you don't know any better, if you haven't differentiated Southeast Asia from East Asia, or, you know, the Indian subcontinent from Thailand, like, okay, like, you are not well-traveled. You are not well-educated, frankly. That's a little bit of a bad look on you because you're kind of ignorant to the, you know, the details of the world. It doesn't make you a bad person. But if you're going to say, like, oh, they all look alike, I mean, honestly, I would just laugh at that if you said that. I would just laugh because, like, obviously they don't. But, like, that is a joke that my friends make right now. So, and it's funny. It's funny. The joke being, like, that you are so in your own world or egocentric that you just automatically turn everyone else into like just like the same background character. Like that's the joke in a way. To me, that's kind of the heart of the joke. Yeah, but to suggest that they all do look alike, I mean, look, they do in a way. There are phenotypes, there are like characteristics that are similar. That's what a race is. So obviously there are similarities. But yeah, it's like you're proving your... It's not hatred, is it? I don't know. 11. It's okay to portray minority characters in TV shows as speaking poor and or heavily accented English. Yes, it's okay. I mean, come on. If you're telling a period piece, if you're like making a period drama, I mean, you could subvert it. Obviously, people do that nowadays with Shakespeare especially, but also with anything, like remake Little Mermaid, remake all these things. You could subvert how it was, but if you're going to make a movie about slavery, you better, like, if you want it to be effective, yeah, make the slave a African American, a black person, and make the slaver, that asshole slave driver, a white guy from England. Why would you not do that? That's how you can tell a convincing story. There's room to play with that, and obviously within Hollywood this is a huge topic and it's interesting, but you're not like, I don't know, what's the argument here, that you're like reinforcing some really outdated stupid behavior, and instead we have to make all the, you know, founding fathers black guys? Like, that is so dumb. I don't have any tolerance for that. 12. It's okay to make jokes about the food that is served in restaurants owned by non-whites. For instance, lots of garlic in restaurants owned by Arabs, dog meat in Asian restaurants. Well, this is the first time the word joke has shown up, and because of that, I'm tempted to agree. Um, Look, jokes uh, provide a very effective human need of releasing tension and anxieties. And the anxieties in this case are the myriad ideas and beliefs that have landed in our heads and associations. Like, so if we go to a Vietnamese restaurant and we've heard that Vietnamese people might eat dogs, it's like having Tourette's, like Tourette's syndrome is this like affect of like having to go there and scrape out this super weird idea that's popped into your head, and it makes you uncomfortable and you just have to blurt it out. And it's like that, we all have Tourette's to an extent. I certainly do. People tell me all the time that I make comments that are unnecessary, or I'm not reading the room or something. It tends to be like getting political when I shouldn't, or making a strong point when people want to just chill out, that kind of stuff. But it's okay to make jokes. Jokes are great, especially if they're good and successful. Bad jokes, obviously that's unfortunate. If someone makes a joke, the best thing you can do is laugh at it. And if you're going to scold them or roll your eyes or be like, oh my God, my stupid dad, I can't believe he said such a racist thing. No, there's no dog food in this dish, Dad. It's called, it's called a banh mi. There's no dog meat in it. Like, okay, you're cool. You're more cultured than your dad. But your dad was probably having this like anxiety of like, oh, don't the Vietnamese eat dogs? I've never seen anyone eat dog when I was in Vietnam. I've been there. I spent time there. I've never seen that. Or is it Koreans that are, I don't know. Yes, it's okay to make jokes. It's funny. It's hopefully funny. If it's not, yeah, again, it's too bad. But this is the first thing I'm going to fully agree with. Like, you're not making the joke at the expense of the restaurant and Asian people or Arab people. Ideally, you're making the joke about yourself and your own anxieties about the food and a different culture. That's like what smart comedy is doing. Like Ricky Gervais in The Office, Steve Carell in The Office. Those are like easy examples. It's like you make a character, Homer Simpson also, Family Guy. You make the character seem like a buffoon or some outdated guy like All in the Family from the classic TV era. So that you can get these anxieties out through humor. And then you have the rest of the cast like admonishing them in some way. But the joke itself is fine. Those shows are funny for a reason. White people have a duty to educate themselves, here we go, on the racist actions of their forebears. God, I hate that, the way that sounds. I hate that sentence. White people have a duty to educate themselves on the racist actions of their forebears. Okay. Like, we learned about slavery, didn't we? Yes, keep slavery in the curriculum. Like, I'm not trying to avoid it. I guess some people are. I guess maybe people in the South are trying to skip over that or something, whitewash it, so to speak. There is a movement in education to also emphasize all the other slavery throughout history everywhere else. And quite honestly, I agree with that, because it took me a very long time to realize that the USA did not invent racism and slavery. Because when I grew up in the California school system, I definitely learned about slavery, and I never learned about any other slavery. Like, I think I remember that the Romans had slaves or something like that, but it was all just part of Western canon. We never learned about, we certainly didn't learn about the Arab slave trade, which has been much larger from Africa than the West. And we haven't learned about, like, the raping and pillaging of the Japanese, of the Chinese, for instance. Like, there's so much interracial war and crime in history And we should also learn that. I don't know if that makes me sound like a Republican or something, but I don't know why it's specific to Caucasians from Anglo-Saxon Europe to learn about their dreaded past as if it's some sort of original sin that we can never forget. That it feels very religious. It feels very religious, all this stuff. And I do think that this like woke anti-racism ideology is religious. Like, that's what that language sounds like, that white people have a duty to educate themselves on the racist actions of their forebears. Like, no, I want to strongly disagree just because of how that is worded. But yes, I do think that people have an obligation of sorts to understand their culture in all its faults. I think that, for instance, the Armenian genocide should be recognized by the Turks, and that it doesn't have to humiliate the Turkish people or the state of Turkey. Like, it can just be done, that you can issue an apology. This like constant denial and like, you know, forgiving of it or you know, making excuses for it, it's really pathetic to me. And almost every country does that. You know, Japan doesn't fully, you know, lavish themselves in their past sins, of which they committed many. Germany does, and the US does. Who else? I mean, the UK a bit, but most cultures don't like get off in this fetishistic, you know, masochism of like, oh, we were so bad, we're such terrible people, we're such racists, oh my god, we did the worst things ever, we can never forget. Like, you look like a crazy person. 14. I don't really think minorities in the West were historically the target of racist actions. Yeah, so obviously the two big ones for the US are the Amerindian natives and African slaves. And I actually think that racism was like an additive to those agendas. The agendas being to conquer a new land and to benefit from free labor. It was convenient that they were others and that you could other them and therefore, you know, dehumanize them and subjugate them and kill them off or use them. I mean, that's a tactic throughout history that people do that, but it's not always the case that they are different races. I mean, the Slavs, Russian Slavs, Slavic people are slaves, and they were enslaved, and they're all white. You know, the Irish and the English look basically the same, but they do not behave the same. They have a long history of hating each other. So I almost want to agree with this. Like, I don't really think that, but it's also wrong. Because, like, you know, the drug war, that was invented by an actual guy, you know, coming off Prohibition. Like, so many of the drug laws of outlawing heroin and cocaine, like, it was cannabis, you know, and it was opium being brought in from the Chinese into San Francisco. Outlaw opium, you know, cannabis being brought up by Mexicans and Latinos. Outlaw marijuana. So yeah, there were minorities that were targeted racially, for sure. That was true. I mean, Japanese descendants, you know, put in camps temporarily during World War II. Germans weren't like that. So, like, German descendants, rather, in the U.S., second largest group, so it's kind of harder. But, yeah, I disagree, because I do think that minorities in the West were targeted. But I do think that, again, this idea that it's all about this one thing, race, I think that's wrong. But there's also truth, you know? It's just like getting it right, of like recognizing what you've done wrong and how you've corrected it, but also not like lambasting yourself excessively. It's legitimate for Western countries to impose stricter immigration restrictions on people from minority countries. Minority countries doesn't work. Non-white countries. Okay, fine. It is legitimate for Western countries to impose stricter immigration restrictions on people from non-Western countries than they do for immigrants from Western or white countries. I do think it is legitimate. I do. I think it's fine. I think if it's literally like, if you're white, then you're in. If you're not white, you're out. That's bad. That sounds bad, and it is bad. But if you say something like, we want people that can assimilate well, that share our values, that have a similar, perhaps, economic status, that come here for higher end work, I think that's totally acceptable and actually ideal, to be honest with you. Like, I actually would support that kind of immigration policy. It's not designed to keep out black and brown people. You're the one making that. Like, you're saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, let's bring in people that can assimilate well, that, they're here almost like because they're the best and the brightest. And if they want to work, in entertainment, then Hollywood's the place. Or if they want to work in tech, then Silicon Valley's the place. Or if they want to work in finance, then New York is the place. And America happens to have a lot of desirous places to work. And so you want the best tech people. A lot of those, by the way, are Indian. So that's cool. And they're welcome in my book because they bring a valuable skill and they can assimilate. They can't assimilate as well as like someone from Sweden. I've seen that, and it's okay. It's not the end of the world. But, I think it makes sense that countries want to maintain their character. I think it makes sense, and it's allowed. You're not racist for that. I don't like how it's phrased because it makes it racist sounding. I would say it is legitimate for Western countries to impose stricter immigration restrictions on countries that are less wealthy, countries with different religious beliefs, countries where you have a proven track record of it harder to assimilate than they do for immigrants of allied countries or wealthy countries or Western countries. Like, there's a reason why the Schengen zone exists in Europe and that you can pass from the Netherlands to Belgium to France to Germany. Like, you can do all that easily because those countries are by and large culturally the same. It ends, like you can't go from Spain to Morocco freely. There's an actual border control there because those are not even close to the same. And I don't know why that's so difficult to understand. Like Canada and the USA are the same culturally. They're the same, basically. Mexico is not. And it's not racism. It's not racism. It's like pragmatic movement of similar like-minded people versus the situation we have right now, a crisis at the border when everyone wants to pour in. Like, those are different things. Like, why are you making it about race? It's not about race. Like, there are plenty of diverse ethnicities in Canada and the USA. It's not about race. There are plenty of different ethnicities in North America. This question is phrased in a racist way, but it shouldn't be. 16. It is offensive to suggest to minorities that they look like celebrities who share their ethnicity. For instance, that Asian people look like Bruce Lee, black people look like Will Smith. Some black people do look like Will Smith. Others look like Denzel Washington. Others look like Kanye West. Others look like Michael Jordan. Like, these are types of people. Like, what? Are you saying that because they're black, they're not allowed to look like a famous person? Obviously, not all Asian people look like Bruce Lee, but some do. Bruce Lee has, like, specific features, like a more square jaw and, like, a bowl haircut and, like, a wiry frame. That's obviously not every Asian guy, but it is some, and some look like him. It's okay. Not every white guy. I hear, like, nowadays, it's like trendy to like say like, oh, all white people look like that guy from Parks and Rec and Gardens of the Galaxy. That guy, just some white guy, you know. Oh, you know, some white actor, whatever. They're all the same. They all look the same. Like, okay, that's funny. It's funny the same way that people say all Chinese people look the same. It's the same kind of funny, and it's the same kind of inappropriate. People bring in this punching up, punching down, like you're allowed to say that about white people because they have institutional power. That is so stupid. That is so dumb. You don't have institutional power if you're like going to a school that's all minorities, all black school. You don't have institutional power if you're poor and on government subsidies and stuff. Like, this is also just phrased so ineloquently. Like, I wish that this quiz was more specific. I have no idea how I'm going to turn out on this, but it's like, and I ask this more specifically. It is offensive to suggest to a non-white person, no matter how they look, that they do look like that celebrity. That would be offensive. Oh, you're black. You look like, you know, Malcolm X because you're black. That's the only reason I think that. That is offensive. But if you actually do have like a really suave, sophisticated style of dress with a collar and a tie and nice black frames, glasses, and a crew cut, you might look like Malcolm X. You know, it's okay. He wasn't like the most unique looking person of all time. You know what I mean? But like, I'm not sure if the question is asking that or if it's just saying like, ever, if someone even resembles them, is it okay? Like, I do think it's okay, but I can't tell if the question's actually asking that. I am the kind of person that will say, hey, you look like this actor. And if I catch myself doing that to like a minority, a black person or an Asian person or whatever, and then I think, oh, am I not allowed to say this because they're a minority? Then I think, now I'm going to say it for sure because I want to treat them the same. That is my principle. Treat them the same. Don't treat them with kid gloves like they're children just because you are uptight about race. 17. It's offensive to ask minorities if they can teach you sports that people of their race have traditionally been good at. All right, this is getting really redundant. I mean, yeah. It's embarrassing. It is embarrassing. Offensive. I mean, I wish we would define this word offensive. It's rude. It's rude and embarrassing to assume that someone is good at basketball. If you make a joke, there's such a smooth way of doing that. You can imagine that in a script like, hey, you're black, you're good at basketball, right? Ha ha ha. Actually, I am good at basketball. Okay, cool. Will you teach me? Like, that could easily be done in a nice way. But just to just say like, hey, can you teach me basketball? Why do you think I'm good at basketball? Oh, because you're black. Like, then that's bad. And we've all seen that scene a lot, right? So sure, this one is a little offensive to assume that. It's okay to it's okay to portray minorities in commercials as being bad at English. Yes. If your point of the commercial is to show a foreign person and you hire someone that can do a foreign accent and they're willing to do the accent for money, it's okay. I don't know what commercial that is. ESL commercial. This is also a really awkward sentence. It's okay to portray minorities in commercials. Now we're using the word minorities as being bad English. It's not okay to just advertise that all minorities are bad at English. And that's one way to read that sentence. It is okay to cast a minority to play a foreign person. Like, you see the difference? And the way this is worded, it could go either way. This could be interpreted in either of those directions, and one of those directions is fine and the other's bad. So this is a bad test, in my opinion. But I'm just very curious to see what kind of results we get. Slightly agree. 19. We're almost there, guys. It's okay to assume that people mostly have friends that share their own ethnicity. Again, assumptions are dangerous, but by and large, people do in-group and hang out and fraternize with people that they relate to. And that's especially true for minority groups or foreigners who come here and found their own parts of town. Obviously, that happens. Little Armenia is close by here, K-Town, Little Tokyo, Thai Town, East LA is more Mexican. Like, that happens everywhere, and it's normal. Don't act shocked if someone has other friends that are diverse. Don't act shocked. Like, we should be cosmopolitan and sophisticated about this, and we should not harbor hatred. Those are not hard rules to learn. You know, it takes time. Like, a 10-year-old's not going to get that statement I just said right away, but they'll grow up to be cool and savvy in the world. You don't have to, like, force feed it. Just be cool. Just talk about the different parts of the world and different customs and how people are and patterns that have happened through history. Like, it's fine. In general, this is true, that people tend to stick to their own, so to speak. And their own doesn't have to be race. It could be religion. It could be tastes and interests. It's tricky. I mean, the US is, like, so diverse, and, like, my friend group is, like, I don't think that we're special at all, but my friend group is pretty diverse. Again, I wish this was just phrased tighter so that I could properly answer it. And it's such a loose question that I just really don't know how the algorithm is going to treat my answer. I generally think that things are okay. So I'm going to say that I slightly agree that it's okay. Last one, it's okay to portray non-whites in Western movies in accordance with racial stereotypes. Arabs prone to violence, Asians as non-assertive. You know, I've seen so many movies, and those are things, and it tends to be lazy writing, but sometimes you do need that character. And what are you going to do? Not cast them because you don't want to prove that all Arabs are violent or something? Like, that is so PC. That is so overly sensitive to me. Yes, it's okay. Now, I realized I didn't actually read the intro to this, so I'll just, before I click finish, let me just read this paragraph. This is based on research from the University of Maryland and UC Santa Barbara. Racism covers prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race than one's own. I summarize that as hatred. But those are, like, active antagonistic things, right? In spite of this definition, however, not everyone agrees what constitutes racism and what doesn't. To this end, researchers created their own instrument for measuring white majority racism directed against non-white minorities. All right, let's see what I scored here. Okay, so let's make sense of this. I'm seeing 4 bar graphs, me compared to the population averages. We have general racism, socio-historical racism, perpetual foreigner racism, and total racism. And I am 20% more prone to racism than the average person overall. Okay, apparently I'm a little bit racist according to this. In the details, I'm 13.81% more prone to general racism. General racism being described as measuring belief in racial stereotypes and racial group identities, as well as the belief that non-whites are generally less advanced than whites. That is not racism. That is empirically the case. That is empirically true. If I was to say that, Arab civilization is less advanced than white European-centric civilization, that is measurable. That is measurable. That is not antagonistic. That is not dooming an Arab person to being less than. I have plenty of room in my mind for any individual to transcend these kind of historical things. Socio-historical racism denotes social attitudes that portray non-whites as being inferior to whites and that neglect historical racism in the West. So this one I'm high, 65%. Those must have been all the questions of like, is it okay to portray a black actor as a butler or a slave? Like, yes, it's okay. No, you're being socio-historically racist. You're denoting social attitudes that portray black people as being inferior to whites. Well, if you're doing a period drama that takes place in 1700, black people were socially inferior to whites. That is not me saying that that's still the case. That is you not being able to get over the fact that you don't know how to read fiction and cast this actor who's getting paid the same amount as that white actor and who goes home to his own house. Like, that is so stupid. Perpetual foreigner racism measures attitudes that signal to non-whites that they are incapable of assimilating fully and that they will never truly be Western. I lived in Europe when this was a big topic, and I'm praying to no God whatsoever that all ethnicities can buy in and assimilate to Western culture in all of its civil rights and liberties, because I believe in those ideas for all people, and I know that my ancestry can do that, and I'm sure that anyone can, but it does take time, and it isn't the easiest thing. It takes some attention and effort. Total racism measures the test taker's total racism as defined by researchers Liang, Lee, and Kim. Okay, am I racist in presuming that they're Asian based on those names? No. Higher scores indicate a greater degree of racism according to their view. All right, you guys. Liang, Lee, and Kim, you've just made my list of academics I do not respect if you think that my attitudes that I've displayed today are racist. I think that you need to get over yourselves and chill out. It is not racist to take note of unrest in Europe and to question if mass migration is healthy, if a society can assimilate all that at once, if it's coming from a place that's so different culturally. It's not racist. It's a fair, necessary question of wondering how to do that the right way so that everyone's happy. It's not racist to portray the past accurately. That's a mature, sophisticated thing to do, and people use their imaginations. It's really annoying. I'm really annoyed by that. But anyways, guys, I hope that was interesting for you to see me take. I'm going to take a screenshot of this. I think that was a pretty bad test, but I'm happy to have had the opportunity to talk out these topics. I think they're interesting and good topics to think about. So I am declaring myself racist so that you don't have to. All right, guys. Until next time. Ciao.